a mouse with a mission, deep beneath the winding roots of a mossy oak tree, where the forest breathes in whispers and dew sparkles like diamonds on spiderwebs, there lived a small and fussy wood mouse named Mrs. Thomasina Tittlemouse. She was as neat as a pin, proud as a peacock in the most polite way, and lived by the firm belief that every crumb had its place, and its place was not on her spotless floor. Her home was a miracle of miniature architecture. Winding burrows lined with sand, shelves made of bark, cupboards brimming with neatly labeled herbs, and floors so clean you could eat off them. Though of course, she would never allow that. Every spoon was polished, every acorn cup precisely stacked. It was a sanctuary of order in a world full of muddy paws and nosy insects. And oh, the world was full of them, the first intrusions. It began one fine spring morning. Mrs. Tittlemouse had just finished her seasonal dusting, which meant she had swept every tunnel twice, rearranged her dried seed collection by size, and fluffed the moss cushions. She sat down with a thimble of rosehip tea when she heard it, the clumsy clatter of beetle legs. "Shoo! Shoo! Dirty little feet!" she cried, brandishing her dustpan like a knight with a sword. The beetles scurried out without apology, but the peace didn't last. Next came a ladybird fluttering through the window. "Your house is on fire. Fly home to your children," Mrs. Tittlemouse recited sternly, flapping her apron. The ladybird seemed confused, but eventually flew off, leaving behind the faint smell of wings and pollen. Mrs. Tittlemouse sighed. She would have to re-sweep. A buzzing dilemma. As she moved through a seldom-used corridor, she caught the low hum of buzzing. That's never a good sign in a mouse's home. She followed the sound and found a large, round bumblebee stuck in a narrow tunnel. "Excuse me," grunted Babbity Bumble, wiggling furiously. "This passage is far too small for a lady of my size." "Because it's not made for bees," muttered Mrs. Tittlemouse. Babbity finally popped into the pantry and gasped. "What a lovely place! Smells like heaven." Before Mrs. Tittlemouse could object, more bees came buzzing in. They began making themselves at home, building wax cells in her flower jars, sipping nectar from her dried chamomile, even napping in the cinnamon drawer. Mrs. Tittlemouse whiskers bristled. This was war. A visitor in webbed shoes. Just as she was preparing an eviction notice for the bees, possibly with illustrations, there came a sloshy squelch from the main tunnel. She turned to find a large, wet figure looming in her doorway. It was Mr. Jackson the Toad, an enormous, swampy fellow with a booming voice and no concept of personal boundaries. "Good day, ma'am," he croaked, stepping straight onto her freshly waxed floor. "Good day," she replied with a frozen smile, watching him drip onto her rug. "Got anything to eat? Perhaps a bit of honey?" Reluctantly, Mrs. Tittlemouse fetched a dish of acorn honey, hoping to speed his departure. Mr. Jackson slurped it up noisily, then proceeded to explore, poking into corners, lifting lids, and leaving muddy footprints on everything. "What's this? Bees? Wax? Smells delicious," he declared, poking a finger into a honeycomb the bees had left behind. "That is not food," she said through clenched teeth. He wandered deeper. He dripped. He sloshed. He sneezed into her best basket. Cleanliness crisis. When at last the toad left, mumbling something about mushrooms and damp corners, Mrs. Tittlemouse surveyed the wreckage. Her pantry was sticky, her floors were muddy, and there were still bees buzzing somewhere in the back wall. She sat down in despair, her tail limp. Something had to change. She could not spend her life sweeping behind beetles, bees, and toads. And so began the great renovation. She spent the next 2 weeks sealing every hole, stuffing every crack with moss and pebbles. She carved tiny wooden doors, each with a twisty latch. She brewed peppermint oil to deter the bees and posted polite little signs at every entrance. No bugs beyond this point. She even invented a locking system with acorn caps. The quiet return. At last, The house was hers again. It was quiet. It was clean. It smelled of mint and cinnamon and dignity. She laid out her tea service. A thimble of chamomile, a plate of sunflower seed biscuits, and a sprig of fresh thyme. She settled into her mossy armchair, perfectly content. Outside, the woods hummed with life. The buzz of bees, the croak of toads, the scurry of beetles. But inside, Mrs. Tittlemouse smiled, knowing her peaceful, perfect home was hers and hers alone. Because a mouse's house is not a hotel. It is a castle, and every castle needs a queen. And Mrs. Tittlemouse was most certainly that.